Thank you, Mark, for your nice presentation, which explained the whole process of creating special and specialty coffees. The final presentation of the day is by Mr. Sanjiv Chatterjee on emerging trends and innovations in tea. Mr. Sanjiv Chatterjee is the head of supply chain, Africa, Middle East, and Turkey in Lipton Tea Infusions. Mr. Sanjiv Chatterjee has had a career spanning 35 years in supply chain and tea. Starting off as a trainee commodities buyer in Lipton India Limited, he moved on to head various roles in Unilever South Asia, including the FNR Exports portfolio, the Tea Excellence Center, before taking on the role of Cluster Quality Director for Unilever India. His last role before his current one as the head of supply chain operations for Lipton Teas and Infusions was as the supply chain director for Unilever South Asia, where he also headed the ice cream business for India. Let me welcome Mr. Sanjiv Chatterjee to present his paper.
This is a bit of a homecoming for me because when Sanjit, a lot of you perhaps may not know, but I started my career in this specific room. This room I think was the auction center for Kunur, right? So I can see Lakshman there. So we used to travel all the way from Coimbatore, which was an auction center opposite a hotel which was in a school. And then I used to do Cochin auctions as well. So when Sanjit gave me a call and said, "Can you speak?" I said I was very happy to do so. So it's a bit of like a homecoming for me. And therefore, and of course, now I realize that I'm the last speaker between you and dinner or drinks, depending on what you prefer. So I hope you will give me enough of your attention for me to go through this presentation for you. What I wanted to talk to you about was the emerging trends in global teas. Okay, so somebody's changed the font, but anyway, it doesn't matter. What I wanted to talk about was the four things. One is the story of Lipton from 1869 till now. It's only fair that since I'm from Lipton, I talk to you one slide on the story of Lipton. And I'll just talk maybe 2 or 3 slides on the AMET region. The AMET region is the Africa, Middle East, and Turkey region, primarily to set the tone for what I want to talk about later on, which is how AMET, in a way, is mirroring what's happening in the rest of the world. And therefore, how is it kind of, how it'll only help you understand the global trends a little better, yeah? Before I go on to talking about the trends and what I see as growth, by the way, this is my point of view, so you guys may have a different opinion, but bear in mind that this is my point of view after all the travels I've done across the world, especially in AMET region. And the last thing, you know, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been coming to places like this, also to the Indian Tea Board, but actually nobody's really spelt out what does it mean for the industry. So I'll try in my level best to explain to you what does this global trend, what does it mean for the South Indian tea industry, yeah? And how do what can you take out of it? So before I go on, I'll just talk a little bit about Lipton. Lipton was founded in 1869. It was also my first company before I moved on to Hindustan Lever. And it's gone through all those phases. We were, I think, the first company to introduce Rainforest Alliance. Tetley followed suit thereafter. Some notable things that happened in 2021, 22, 23, which is that in 2021, July 2021, which is when I joined the company Ekaterra, we became a separate company within Unilever with the intention of being sold off as a company. And then we were sold off to CVC Partners, who bought us over in 2022. And then subsequently, on 2023, 1st of July, we became a separate entity by ourselves, and we are now called Lipton Teas and Infusions, which is nothing but the tea business of Unilever, barring India and Indonesia. Yeah, that's all the brands, all the global geographies, etc., that we sold tea in, as far as Unilever was concerned, is now housed within Lipton Teas and Infusions. And it's well, you could call us now a startup, but we are a startup with a heritage, which is a plus, actually. Right, so let me just tell you quickly about what the company is about. We are present in about 100 countries. We currently clock about 2 billion in terms of our turnover. And what's important is that we do about 4,600 cups per second. Yeah? We have 11 factories across the whole of the globe. We're making a new one in Turkey right now, and we employ about 17,000 employees, including the tea estates that we own in Kenya and Rwanda. Right. So this is what we're about. And I won't take you through a lot of this. This is what our pitch is, our vision is, our mission is. We believe that while we sell tea, we also have a role to play in building entrepreneurships, families, looking after families, and looking after all the people who work within our ecosphere. These are our local jewels. Now, you don't see Lipton much in India. That's because there is a very strong brand in India called Taj Mahal. But Lipton globally is the world's largest tea brand. And while we have that, we have very strong archetype brands, which we call local jewels. Some of them are, for example, you've heard of PG Tips in the UK. Tazo is one. There's one in South Africa called Glen. Then there is another one called Joko in South Africa. And then there is Three Roses or Red Roses in Canada, and so on and so forth. But the global brand, Lipton, is the single largest global brand for tea. And of course, very recently, we've acquired Pakka as well. So Pakka is also now part of us. So I'll now take you maybe 2 slides on what's happening in the Amet region, yeah, and set you up for what I'm trying to explain to you. It's very much like India. It's a household product. In every family, tea is something that the whole of Amet loves. Turkey consumes the most amount of tea in the world. I think it's about 3.6 kilograms or more than 4 kilograms per day, per person, per annum. And you just have to be in Turkey to realize how much they love their tea. They've even coined a tea preparation protocol which they follow across the whole of Turkey for the quality of tea that they make, which is by their standards very good, but by tea taster standards may not be very, very good. But they have somehow overcome that by creating their own tea preparation protocol, and they have canisters and all kinds of stuff to kind of contribute to that particular taste. There's the Arabia area, of course, where, again, tea is almost part of life. And of course, now there are other regions like Nigeria and South Africa where penetration is low, but you've also got teas like Rooibos, which is also a big deal in that part of the market. Tea is growing by 15% in value CAGR to 2019, but the whole beverage market is growing at about 19%. So we are growing by value lower than the rest of the beverages. Yeah, which in itself is a problem. And when you look at it from a share of wallet, what happened? Okay, so we are a 55% share of throat, right? But as a percentage, by value, by share of wallet, we are only 5%. And which tells you the story that in terms of value, tea hasn't been able to grow, and which is the problem that we need to solve, yeah? And that's the problem that I have seen wherever I go. If you go to any market, anywhere in the world, your share of throat is always, high at high levels, but your share of wallet has always been a very, very low number. I hope all of you guys understand when I say share of wallet, yeah? So that's the problem that we need to solve. In terms of growth, what you will see is tea is in the Amet region. Black tea is still the mainstay. But what's growing very fast is the fruits, herbals, and greens, yeah? Which is the next future of tea drinking is in fruits, herbals, and greens as people become much more obsessed with health and so on and so forth, yeah? Green is still a value contribution of 4%, but it is growing at a relatively lower percent is about 3.6 to 3.7% per annum. And these are the kind of things that the AMET consumer is now waking up to, yeah? This is what they are looking for. They're looking for growth of in-home coffee. This is something that is becoming a trend in AMET, which affects us a lot. What's very important or very interesting for me actually coming from India is that what we take for granted as water is now becoming a trend. So there is a vitamin water, there is this infused water, there is that infused water. So water itself is becoming a competition. What was once a very ubiquitous stuff that we never thought of is now becoming something that is challenging is tea itself. Yeah. And the third one is that clearly people are going after out-of-home experiences. And you saw that when I think Sushant was talking about it, how out-of-home is growing. So clearly the out-of-home experiences are something, especially post-COVID, I think people are coming back to out-of-home with a vengeance. Yeah. So these are the three kind of things that we need to keep in mind. And this, I think, when I go around the world, this is more or less mirroring what's happening in the rest of the world. Okay, so what I see as point of view, I have my point of view on future trends. Before I go on, let me give you, this is not my data, this is Euromonitor. The critical thing to remember is that as a category, we are very, very large. We will hit 172 billion USD in the next 4 years. So it's a very large category. But the problem is that this category is not growing fast enough. Other beverages are growing much, much faster. Water is growing faster. Soft beverages are growing faster. Certainly coffee is growing faster than us. It's a reality that we need to take cognizance of. And I thought I'll just tell you some data or share with you some data on the other things that are happening. So one of the things that we see is in tea cultures, the standard black tea is still the mainstay, right? Where is the greens and fruits and herbals and where all of this specialty growing? These are growing in predominantly coffee cultures, right? So that's what's happening. While black tea is the mainstay, fruits, herbals, and greens and specialty teas are growing primarily in coffee cultures. Then you will find there are these pockets where things are happening. For example, in Egypt, people who've been to Egypt will realize that there's a brand there called Isis. Yeah, they sell 12 tea bags of flavors. And very strangely enough, they don't flavor green, they flavor the black tea, right? And it's a 12 tea bags pack, which I don't think anywhere else in the world that is sold. Then you've got South Africa, which is a strong affinity for rooibos. It's a bit like what Horlicks is to us. When you're not feeling well, when you're a child, you teach and you share rooibos. Therefore, the good news is that tea drinking as a habit starts very, very early in these markets. And the third one is the growth of green, which is Pakistan, which is something which, in fact, I have seen in the last, say, 5-7 years, Pakistan growing. Pakistan is a hardcore Kenyan black tea market. Yeah, it's an inverted pyramid when it comes to quality. There's a large instant tea market, which is in China, which is powders. We alone sell about 10,000 tons of powders in China, which is your 3-in-1 powders. Then you've got Argentinian, which is in fruits, herbal, and green in the US. And you've got important Sri Lankan market. For Sri Lankan teas, you got this, what is this country called? Chile. And that's about it. I mean, these are the things that I've picked up while going around. And then there are very strange things that are happening, like you might never see an Iranian tea, but you go to Turkey and you talk to the people there, there is Iranian tea that is coming into the Turkish market by way of grey trade, yeah? In terms of consumption, and by the way, this will be my last statistic slide, trust me, because even I don't like too much statistics. But in terms of consumption, when you look at the number of countries that we normally look at, we normally look at the countries that are reported by FAO. 9 out of those 24 markets are slowing down, and there are 3 large clusters: UK, Middle East, and Southeast Asia. All of these clusters are doing well. Some of the individual countries in these clusters may not be doing well, but overall they remain very strong. But yes, they are not growing as fast as coffee and the rest. The other problem that is happening to tea globally is the forex volatility. So people have seen Kenyan markets getting very, very badly affected by the fact that Egypt today is out of LC. So if you go to Egypt and you try and open an LC for tea, I'm told that the tea is, I think, the 10th in the list. First is pharmaceuticals and the like, and then it comes down to tea. Yeah. So there is not much money left over for tea. There is certainly a lot more focus on people exporting out of Egypt in order to earn forex. So also in Nigeria, for example, Nigeria has a forex, currently a naira is about 950. It was about, the minute it opened up, it went from 700 something to 900 nairas. And so that is a very strange thing that's happening that is going to affect maybe the Russian war and the Ukrainian war and the volatility and the crude oil volatility, that all of that is contributing, whether you like it or not, to the trade that we do in tea. Yeah? Right. So what are some of the key trends that I have actually this thing? Firstly is increasing disposable income of emerging markets. Yeah? We do know that markets like India, markets like South Asia, for example, Southeast Asia, there are markets where the emerging trends are towards higher disposable incomes. The second one is there is a need, well, I wouldn't say a need, there is a affinity to go to premiumized products. We've seen that in India, right? The volume of premium products available is far more than what it was 5 years ago. Then the third one is increasing popularity of health and lifestyle, which I don't have to say much. Everybody knows that people are becoming much, much more health conscious than before. Going to the gym is no longer something that people do on weekends. They do almost every day. And the other thing that is happening is, as the millennials come into the picture, they want to understand, where does my product come from? They want to understand provenance. Yeah. So this is what I'm seeing in AMET, and if AMET is mirroring what's happening in Europe and the rest of the world, there will come a point in time then it will surely, while I was in India, I didn't see a great trend in this for certain, but I'm sure that as you premiumize, as the millennials come into the picture, this will become an issue here as well. The other thing is, like I said, new beverage experiences and the rise of online commerce. I mean, I don't have to explain to you how strong e-com is, because you guys are staying in India. It is by far the most important channel that we must have answers to. And this is something that will drive make or break for a lot of companies, especially in tea. Yeah? So how can tea respond? We must deliver on those new experiences, yeah, and which basically means we talk about new brands, formats. Iced teas is becoming a very, very popular format. So do we have appropriate teas for iced teas? Yeah. Out of home as a key driver for trends, as I've said before. Tea tourism is something that I'm seeing slightly coming up. At least when I speak to my friends in Darjeeling, I can see that I think Ambutia is doing it, and quite a few other tea estates are doing it. That helps not so much as tourism, but also the fact that they grow the knowledge or an affinity for tea as a category. Yeah, and that helps. Deliver healthier choices, especially post-COVID, which is wellness teas for body, heart, and mind. So wellness teas, functional teas, these are teas that are growing in terms of intent. We in India had launched Three Roses, what was it called? It was a clinically tested product against immunity, and it took a lot of time before it I think it took us about 7 years before it really took off. But we stayed with that brand for 7 years. And the last one is how to reframe quality, which is, And when I say quality, it's just not, and that's why I said the word accessible quality. It's just not, quality doesn't mean that it has to come at a premium, it has to be, certain kind and so on and so forth. What needs to do is that you have to define what your quality is, and you need to make that accessible. If your quality is about, for example, that my teas come from estates which are, let's say, CO2 positive, I don't know. Well, that's a quality standpoint that you can talk about, right? And that's your niche. So, and you can make it accessible if you want, right? And of course, provenance and sustainability, this is something that is an emerging trend that has always been there. So then I asked the question, so what does it mean for you guys? Yeah? Okay, this is what's happening across the whole world. But as a planter, what does it mean for you guys? I put my thoughts through. I know some of you may differ with it, but I've done about 35 years in tea now. I suspect I know a bit about what to do in this place. The first one, let me remind you of that, which is the 55 and 5%. We have to now take it for granted that safety is now increasingly par for the course. Nobody is going to pay us a premium for proving or talking about our teas being safe. Yeah? We have to find ways to overcome the fact that this is par for the course and drive value. Now, if you want to drive value up, this is something that we need to recognize. And I know that this is a bit of a problem for all planters, because when I was in India, everybody used to complain, saying, this is going to cost me so much and so forth. But the problem is you're competing with other countries where this is already par for the course. A Sri Lankan tea, for example, this is already par for the course. So why would somebody go for something that is unsafe if you're not then going in for it yourself? Yeah? Think about it in your own homes. If you know that a spice, for example, is not rightly produced, any spice, you take any spice, would you buy it for your family? Right? So that's the thinking that's gone inside. And why is it so? These are the 4 trends that I've noticed across the whole world. One is there's a reduction in MRLs across the whole globe. Now we can complain that this is becoming unreasonable and so on and so forth, but this is going to stay. Reduction in MRLs is there, right? As the people get more and more aware of health risks, right? And this is social media at work for you, right? The second one is there's going to be increased monitoring from the government. As the social media gets more active, as people get more health aware, there's going to be more pressure on the government to put in all these monitoring mechanisms. Yeah? Now you can complain saying you're being unreasonable, but then again, keep in mind that you are just one country producing tea versus other countries that are already up the ladder. The third one is what, for example, a lot of the European countries are doing is that they're harmonizing the MRLs, right? Now what happens is some countries may be very good in some pesticide residues, some countries may struggle with some kind of pesticide residue. What the Europeans are trying to do, or the Americans are trying to do, is to harmonize it. Why? Because then they don't have to worry about, if this tea is from this place, then this is my problem. If this tea is from this place, then this is my problem. If they have a harmonized MRLs across, now this is not going to sound very happy for individual countries. So I'm sure Kenya has similar problems on some of those pesticides as we do. And the other one that is happening is that there's development of new analytical methods. As science progresses, there are newer and newer analytical methods, which are going to then mean that very, very faint traces of pesticides or MRLs are going to be picked up, which were not picked up maybe 20 years ago. But these are the real trends that are happening. Right. So the first part was par for the course, get real. This is what it is. The second one is, I think one of the things that we need to do as an industry is basically understand what does your market want, yeah? And it's more from the difference is what I call the observation versus insights. The fact that you're doing it repeatedly is an observation. The reason why you're doing it is the insight, which is actionable, right? So if I can figure out why you're doing what you're doing, then that's an insight which is actionable, which I can trace back, right? So I'll give you 2 examples from my life. Number one, I had some people, although I don't taste or buy tea anymore, but there are these friends who come over to Dubai, and he brought some samples across, and some of those teas, and I looked at it and I said, look, this tea could work for Egypt, but you'll need to put it, you need to test this out. So we took some water, we put the tea in it, and we had floating fibers. Yeah? The minute you see floating fibers to an Egyptian, that's a no-no. Because why? Because their preparation protocol is they boil the tea, they boil the water, and they put the tea in it. They don't throw the tea away, right? So they drink straight off the cup where the tea settles at the bottom. Now imagine if you're drinking a cup of tea and your floating fibers are going up, it's coming in the way of your taste, right? So if you're able to calculate that inside, then you will know how to clean your tea, right? And that's how I explained to that guy. So embedded fiber is fine, floating fiber is not something that we do. And by the way, when I used to buy tea a long time ago, we used to look at floating fiber versus embedded fiber. We had Saraf, who was Mr. Saraf, I don't know whether he's still buying tea, for the Russians who, yeah. So he was a master at buying, and he would know if there's a floating fiber, and he would kill that tea immediately in the auctions. I'm sorry to use the word kill, but yeah. And the second one is doodh patti. Yeah, doodh patti. If you've gone to Punjab or the other side of the border in Pakistan, they use something called doodh patti chai. Doodh patti chai is essentially it's a milk-rich region, right? And you don't want to you're throwing Assam, a full-bodied Assam, at somebody like a Punjabi or a Sardar whose whole trip in tea is to drink that milk. It's just a waste of money, right? You're throwing a full-bodied Assam at that guy, and he's tasting the tea and he's saying it's bitter. What he needs is something that just colors the tea, right? Now, how do you then translate that into what you want, right? That observation is very, very key. That action is something that will hopefully drive. So the other one, like I said, it's a no-brainer. You have to drive up value. Some of the ways to do that is specialties and herbals. I know a lot of you will ask me questions on this is not Camellia sinensis, but please believe me that horse has bolted, right? Anywhere in the world, tea is anything that you steep in hot water, right? Whether we like it or not, that is what tea is. We'll have to find our ways. Luckily enough, there is a global trend towards specialty black teas, which will help us, right? But there is a move towards specialties and herbals, and of course, controls and certifications. The third one, I believe, is drive up tech automation and analytics. I don't know how much of our estates are currently using digital automation and so on and so forth. I know I've been to one or two about 10 years ago, where these guys had really brought in some amount of automation and some amount of digital controls. This ensures that your product is more or less consistent and the quality remains deliverable in otherwise, let's say, variable weather, variable, all of these kind of things. How do you ensure that your product remains stable? And lastly is advocacy and capability building. One is which is about talking to the right consumers, and this is not just about going to trade fairs. I think Sushant mentioned it when he spoke. This is about going to where the people are to talk about your teas, yeah? And this is about, let's say, tying up with, let's say, bodies like DMCC or bodies like anywhere else, and then using their expertise to talk to potential customers and consumers, yeah? And how do you then kind of bring that to life? And of course, lastly is to have a future fit organization, which is about the ability to absorb automation and digitization into your processes. With that, that's my last slide, so I hope it was interesting enough for you guys.
Thank you, Sanjiv. Lovely presentation, and we look forward to taking forward some of your insights. So, gentlemen, now we have come to the end. I would like to have a few question and answers. If there are any questions from any of the delegates here, please go ahead.
I have three questions. First to Sanjiv. You said that the trend is toward the herbal infusions and the value-added specialty teas. And for that, do you look at full-bodied, denser teas, or is it that you're looking for something lighter, which is different? So is there a difference in the quality of the black tea, what we produce in South India? You know it very well. So is there a perception which we need to shift if that is a trend which is going forward? Secondly, the unfortunate thing is that what you have shown very, very clearly here is the floating fiber tea, and that exactly probably is going and relating to the current market price of 85 rupees. So I think it is also equally responsible at the buyer's end, like the producer should not produce it. The buyer also should desist from such things so that, you encourage people to buy more. So what are your thoughts on those?
So the first one, I think you said about how does South India teas fit into the overall...
Infusions, for the herbal infusions and other things. So bodied, denser tea, is that what you are looking for? Is it
So look, when it comes to South Indian teas, and this is my personal point of view, so don't get me wrong. So I would not use South Indian teas to give body, right? Where I would use South Indian teas would be for teas where I will require a black, a red color with clarity, yeah. Which is, for example, for iced teas. Iced teas, the problem with getting teas from Assam is that it tends to cloud a lot, right? So, and therefore when you put ice in it, it just tends to cloud. That's why Argentinian teas do so well in America, because I think they're I forget the term right now, but the content, the tea soluble solid content is about 12 or 13 or 14%, whereas for Assam's it's about 27%. So in my experience, if you want to do iced teas, you would use teas that are thinner, more colory. That's where I would look at it. The second thing I think is I would look for more towards things like single estate, special blends, and so on and so forth. Yeah. If markets that prefer very strong teas, yeah, such as those markets which go for English breakfast, yeah, or those teas, I don't think South India should go after, yeah, because you will not be able to cater to those markets, yeah. So that's one thing. So I would go for those markets which prefer non-milk, black, specialty, those kind of things, where I think it's a good fit. I don't know whether this is still the case, but a lot of the South Indian teas I used to taste in the past were pacha. Yeah, that's not a taste that I think is liked mostly in Kerala, but it's not something that, or some parts of Kerala, I think, but that's not something that works across the whole globe. Yeah, because the people don't like that under fermented or under fired teas. So I would look for that. So therefore that brings me to the third point, which is consistency. If you can get a consistent tea which can add value to a blend, yeah, that would be where South India should go after. And on specialities, and one thing is for sure, if you're adding flavor, it's just putting flavor onto a full-bodied Assam is just a waste of money, right? But if you want to put flavor, you want the base tea to be certainly taste like tea, but not to overpower the flavor. I think that is where South Indian teas play a... So it gives you the teeness without taking away the cardamom, without taking away the vanilla, or whatever else that you put it there. So that's a space where I see South Indians do well. On floating fiber, I think the auction levels, I mean, when I was a buyer, I'm sorry, I'm talking about 25 years ago or 20 years ago, I think as a matter of rule, floating fibers or any badly produced teas will get its own price. Yeah, and I don't think any buyer will pay the same price for a floating fiber tea, and I'm using floating fiber in a large thing, as it would for a nice black, good bloom tea. Yeah, so I think that should speak for itself. I mean, if you're asking what role should the buyer play, I think the role the buyer should play, I think there's a larger role for the brokers, if you ask me. One of the things that I talked about, which is about observation versus insights, I just find that a lot of the planters don't get to understand those insights. Yeah, because you don't go to the end consumer. So you are driven by what the buyer in the auction is doing, and the buyer in the auction is representing somebody else. Yeah, oftentimes. So that understanding of the markets is something which is to me a very strong, because then that you'll develop a knowledge of this. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. I have one more question for Abhishek. In the carbon market, you said about the preservation, conservation of the swamps or the water bodies. Can you a little more explain on that as a practice? What is to be followed, or what is the recommendation you all have to follow to develop water bodies and swamps?
You're talking about mangroves?
Mangroves, you were saying?
Wetlands restorations,
yeah,
right?
Wetland.
So when you're talking about wetlands restoration, so it is more into the mangroves conservation and restoration. So as we know that mangroves is not good for the carbon sequestration, but actually it is very good for the livelihood as well. It is actually protecting the seashores with a lot of cyclones and the storms as well, right? So due to the human interventions, due to the a lot of infrastructure development, these mangroves are not there right now due to the human interventions, right? So wherever the mangroves are there, right, you need to do the measures to conserve them, that they should not be cut down, or they should not be removed from there. Also, where there were no mangroves right now, we have to replant them. So I'm taking an example of Indonesia. There's an organization called Yakopi. So in Indonesia, they are doing a very good job where they are covering all their coastal areas with the mangroves. So this conservation plus restoration and the replantation of mangroves can play a crucial role, not only from the perspective of climate, but also from the perspective of generating the tourism over there. Especially you can take up the example of Sundarbans, right? So if these kind of mangrove forests are there in the coastal areas of India, that would be really great for this.
Thank you.
Arun?
I have a question.
Just to add on to that, what sir was asking, we actually have a separate biodiversity credits. So are you also dealing with the trading of that biodiversity? How are you assessing it? And whether it will be clubbed with the carbon credits in future? How is the future going to be for that?
So as I said, there's one labeling called CCB, Climate, Community and Biodiversity. So here we need to see the particular project from the three lenses, and biodiversity is one of them. So in biodiversity, we need to understand and we need to do the baseline that on the basis of both flora and fauna. And on the basis of that, we are going there. We are understanding that in early time, what were the flora and fauna were there. But due to some human interventions, they are not now. There are a lot of extinct species over there, right? So we need to do that kind of data collection. And with the replantation of these kind of plantations, will surely bring the animals and species again back to there. So the assessment of the current baseline, what was into the past, and what were the steps which we need to take up, through which we can take up them back. So this is a part of biodiversity assessment under the CCB concept. So along with the plantations, along with the sustainability of the community, these are the things which we need to do for that. Yeah.
And will this be factored into the carbon price?
Exactly. So when we talk about CCB, so in B, as I said, that there are 17 SDG goals, right?
Yes.
And in CCB labeling, if you really want to take up the gold labeling of CCB in terms of biodiversity, so we have some criteria that you have to bring up 2 or 3 plants which were not there, which was into the past, and the species through which they are coming back. So yes, there's a whole assessment, and the crediting period of these projects are 20 years, which can be extended up to 100 years. So in 100 years, you can do the assessment for that, and once they are coming back, so they are surely counting into that. In normal projects, VCS, they are not having that kind of impact as compared to the CCB, where we are taking up the biodiversity as well. So yes, it is surely adding the very good premium onto the carbon credits as compared to the normal VCS projects.
Okay, thank you.
Arun,
This question is from Mr. Chatterjee, Arun Kumar from Pari Agro.
can you hold
You
the
spoke
mic?
about the South Indian teas. Now, South India predominantly makes, RCTs. Now, what would be the future of these RCTs in a blender's basket? Because as you see today, most of the teas seem to have this label called Assam blend. It seems to be the flavor of the season. You go into Karnataka, you go into Andhra. Even the local packetiers today are adding this name called Assam blend. Everybody in South, most of them. In fact, today, recently, another person has added on this Assam logo to one of the South Indian blends. So what would be the future of a South Indian RCT going forward? Because a lot of the Duas teas are coming in, the Siliguri teas are coming in, the Assam teas are coming in. And obviously, those teas are much better, as you say. And those could replace the South Indian teas. Because if you see the price levels, you could get a good Duas tea or a Siliguri tea at 120 or 140 rupees. So what would be the future of an RCT, say 5 years from now or 3 years from now?
Are you talking about India or are you talking about global? India. I can't really answer that because India is a different business, and there is a clearly they know what to do. What they will be better to be able to answer that. I wouldn't answer it for them. But for the global thing, I think I can give you an answer, but you might not like it. Okay. The answer is that you will always be a very good filler, right? You will never see a blend or a product unless you are a single estate, unless you are Nilgiris, yeah? Unless you have those specific jasmine type clones that you can sell. I know I wouldn't take names, but there are estates that make those, because I used to buy them and sell them to, Takano and Mitsui and Mitsubishi. Unless those kind of products you can then sell and market as single estate Nilgiris, a run-of-the-mill product, right, will always be bought for a filler, right? So the question is, how do you add value to that run-of-the-mill? I know that attempts have been made here to make Darjeeling type manufacture and so on and so forth. And if you can take that and talk more about them, I think overall the value should start going up. Yeah.
Mr. Abhishek, you mentioned that monoculture is a problem somewhere. I think somewhere you're going by the very classical understanding of monoculture, because today you look at all the latest studies being done. Monoculture plantations in the world, many monoculture plantations have a much better carbon index, better conservation of soil. They are rating far higher than many of the heterogeneous plantations and forests we are talking about. So just branding monoculture and saying monoculture is a specialized approach in thing. But when we talk about carbon sequestration, we take the plantation ecosystem completely, which may include swamps, it can include forest inside, it can include the planted area. So when you take the entire plantation ecosystem as such, where monoculture is an important constituent, you look at that, calculate that diversity along, whether it is biodiversity or whether you use carbon index, it is far more than even heterogeneous plantations. So the concept that monoculture itself is wrong, which is driven very hard into all of people everywhere. Whenever you talk to anybody, they say monoculture is a sin. It is not. It is a specialized agriculture. But inside monoculture also, there is a lot of heterogeneity. There is a lot of good things that are happening there, which need to be quantified and understood. Just an observation.
Yeah, exactly. You are right. But we have the separate definitions for monoculture, might be into the carbon perspective and might be into the normal plantations. So what we are trying to do that, we don't support the monoculture. So when you're talking about multiculture, it doesn't mean that you have a number of species into a single farm, right? If there is a species of, for example, if there are 100 trees and you are putting up 90 trees of your monoculture as per your commercialization, as per your projects, and the 10 trees with some other species, that can also be called as a multiculture. Secondly, when you're talking about monoculture, and if we are, first of all, in carbon terms, it is not allowed that you need to clear the existing ecosystem and then you can do the any kind of plantations. So when you are clearing up any kind of ecosystem, existing ecosystem, it is somehow disturbing the habitats for as per the flora and the fauna also, right? So in terms of biodiversity, when we're talking about climate, community, and biodiversity, so in biodiversity, it is somehow we are more emphasizing on the multicultural plantations along, even when you're talking about the agroforestry. So in agroforestry, we are doing n number of interventions. So it is again a kind of in multicultural activities, right? So in monoculture, yes, it is good, but in terms of biodiversity, somehow it is done. When you're talking about carbon sequestration, so it is not mandatory that every monoculture plantations is having a good carbon sequestration. Carbon sequestrations has been taken place mostly, and the best carbon sequestration trees are the furniture trees, because they are sequestering more carbon and they're having the high carbon sequestration value. The trees like neem, the trees like bargad, right? So they are having the more carbon sequestration value as compared to the some monoculture species, which is normally using for the low harvesting cycle of the commercialization. So this is the reason why we are putting up the multicultural plantations into this.
Yeah, we'll have the last question.
My question is to Abhishek. I'd like to clarify one point that you made about business as usual. If I understand it right, are you saying that in year zero, whatever efforts you made in terms of investing in projects which add to carbon credits will be treated as null and void, and it is from that point in time that you're eligible for carbon credits, or?
No, business as usual means if an organization is doing some activities through which they are having some specific processes, that I am doing this particular activity, I am going to procure it and I am going to do the market linkages. This is a business as usual activity. But with that particular activity, if you are doing something else, which is actually increasing or some kind of uplifting the livelihood of the communities, or you are putting up some other interventions through which is a little bit different from your business as usual activity, that can be an additionality into the project. So,
for instance, if a company has invested in renewable energy projects previously and wants to go in for a certification currently, would that project be eligible for carbon credits, or?
yes, it is eligible for the carbon credits, because apart from generating the electricity for that particular project, you're actually avoiding the carbon emissions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is to Mr. Chatterjee. Sir, the generalization of South Indian tea as fillers, that has been created in my opinion, sir.
That's why I told you, you might not like it, it's a point of view, right? But trust me, I also have tasted and bought South Indian teas. As a caveat before you go on.
Because we do have distinct regions, sir. We do have distinct geographical locations. We have different types of tea with different flavors, aromas. So why do you generalize South Indian tea as
His question was RC. And if you saw my response, I said that you do have Nilgiris, you do have specific gardens. I know that there is a buyer called Takano in Japan that buys a certain kind of garden by name. I have bought for that person. So it's not to say that I'm not generalizing. I'm saying if you're talking about what is the future of RC, right? If it's a regular standard tea, yeah, that's what I see as a potential area. Which is not to say that it's bad, by the way. Yeah, because if you look at, for example, any blend, right? Any blend is a component of three things. There's a top note, right? Just as in perfumes, there'll be a top note. That top note will give you, let's say, a certain character to the blend. Then there is a medium one that does not take away from the top note. And then there's a base layer, right? Which contributes to the volume. So you are anywhere between, depending upon the tea that you are, and that's not to say that Duaz does not have fillers. Depending upon where you are, you will form part of that particular blend. Unless you are able to say that I want to occupy that top note, which you can do if you do Nilgiris, high groans, for example, yeah? Or you do those certain kind of teas, or a Darjeeling type manufacture, which I know that some estates try to do here. I don't know whether they're still doing it, right? Those are the areas where you can then say, okay, I'm going to now put it in as a single estate tea. And there are single estate South Indian teas available. I mean, it's not that. But if you talk about run-of-the-mill, average, average quality, the answer to that is I will have no choice but to take you as fillers. So again, the point that I was making if you don't drive up value for your products, right, you will be treated like that by any global blender, right?
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. we have come to the end of this program. So let me request Mr. Santosh to present a memento to Mr. Abhishek Srivatsava. I request Mr. MP Cherian to present a memento to Mr. Mark Tormo. I request Mr. Cherian to present a memento to Mr. Sanjiv Chatterjee. May I now request Mr. Sridharan, Vice President, to propose the vote of thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you for gracing this occasion with your presence. Your participation and support and contribution have made this event a success. Let me first thank Mr. Amandeep Singh Bhatia, IAS, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, for agreeing to chair the session and conduct the proceedings and panel discussion on commodities. We've had a very interesting session. He's a great listener, and he was looking for solutions from the industry. Some good takeaways from that session are that he would like to form a core group of both industry, government, T-board officials to do a brainstorming session and address the challenges of price, exports, and value addition. We at UPASI are looking forward to working with him and the T-board, coffee board, rubber board, etc., to address these challenges. I thank Dr. Jagdisha for his presence, for his perspective on the coffee sector and his efforts in organizing the World Coffee Conference that's coming up. He highlighted the need to differentiate our coffee as shade-grown Indian coffee, and also as producers and all of us to be our own, very own brand ambassadors and improve the perception of our coffee. We had an insightful assessment of issues and challenges by Dr. M. Muthukumar on the tea sector. We are truly grateful to you for being with us, and thank you for your interesting presentation on tea. He highlighted the price difference between the organized sector and INCO-served bottle leaf sector and the need to improve the quality. And we at UPASI, sir, are willing to work with you on your goal to achieve an export target of 350 million kgs in the near future. We're extremely thankful to Mr. Vasanta Gesan for his thoughtful insights on the rubber sector. It was indeed heartening that he is visiting UPASI for the first time and taking up charge as ED Rubber Board. He highlighted the difference between rubber, coffee, and the tea industry. Rubber has a shortage of production compared to the consumption, and the efforts being taken by T-board to improve the tapping quality, increasing yields, and also expanding in other non-traditional areas like the Northeast. Let me also take this opportunity to thank our speakers on the technical session on commodities. Mr. Saeed Al-Suwaidi from the DMCC. He had given us some very interesting statistics of global trade. It was interesting to know that more green coffee comes from Europe than other coffee producing countries to Dubai. And the access that DMCC has to the various markets. So it is to today's need, I think it's a good takeaway for producer exporters who would like to look at the strengths and try to store their own product, control the chain, and use DMCC to start exporting teas. I'd also thank Mr. Sushant Dash, who gave us a very interesting perspective of how the market is heading in India, how young consumers are changing the entire landscape. So there's a lot of takeaway for all of us here from his presentation, and how we should be repositioning our product and to the younger consumer. Mr. Abhishek Srivatsava highlighted the details on carbon and how the plantation industry especially can take advantage of these nature-based solutions. And it was interesting to note that nature-based solutions seem to be having a higher market share than renewable energy. So there is a lot of potential here for all of us to take advantage of that. Mr. Mark Thomo had given us an insight into specialty coffee. So this producers, this is very much in our hands, so what we can do, how we can drive up value using expertise from experts like Mr. Mark Thomo. This is definitely in the right direction, so it was very insightful listening to his presentation. And Mr. Sanjiv Chatterjee has given us the global perspective of tea. He's been very candid in his views. Having had experience in South India and having known our landscape, it was insightful. It's given us a lot to think about, and how we can position our tea, how we can take advantage of the neutrality in our tea to be part of certain blends, to be part of flavoring, and also how to drive up value by concentrating more on single estate teas, etc. So it was a very good presentation. Overall, we have achieved today, I think when the executive committee and the president came up with the list of speakers, we wanted to have a list of speakers that will give a lot of takeaways for the audience today, how they can go back and actually take some actionable steps on what has transpired today. So all the speakers, I'd like to thank them for having taken the time and trouble to come here and prepare these presentations in detail, having that in mind. So thank you all for that. Thank you. I would like to thank Messrs. A.V. Thomas, Harrison Malayalam, Kannan Devan, Parry Agro, and Tata Coffee for sponsoring the lunches for the 2 days. And I'd like to thank Mrs. Vasuprada Plantations for sponsoring the refreshments. I also take this opportunity to thank the Tea Board and Coffee Board for sponsoring and serving tea and coffee. Thanks goes to KK Consultant and Engineers for sponsoring the folders. We are greatly indebted to all our planter members for making it convenient to attend this session. My special thanks to each of you for your presence and wholehearted participation for making this session a success. Thank you all.